Welcome to another Dumb Things People Say to Atheists, the series where we talk about things people commonly say to atheists and why they're dumb. The things, not the people. Please be nice to the people. In this episode, we're going to look at yet another thing certain Christians say when, possibly self-conscious about aspects of their own belief system they see as shortcomings, they want to project the same shortcomings onto atheists. Essentially, there are things fundamentally wrong with how they approach knowledge or belief. And since it's hard to elevate such practices to a place of intellectual legitimacy, apologists will try to drag atheists down to their level instead. For example, rather than justifying faith as a means of gaining knowledge, they'll often find it easier just to say that we atheists have more of it, as I explained in my first Dumb Things video. In other cases, they might try to further level the playing field by obscuring the very distinction between religion and, well, not religion. And that is, atheism is just another religion. Yeah, and short is just another tall. Now, on the face of it, this just sounds like audacious nonsense, right? Because by what stretch does atheism fall into any category that could reasonably be called religion? In fact, I'm sure that by this point, most of you have already typed something along the lines of how atheism is a religion the way bald is a hair color or not collecting stamps is a hobby. Come on, you know you're doing it, and that's fine and totally fair. Religion revolves around a belief in the supernatural, most often gods, usually involving a long-standing body of deeply ingrained traditions and rituals. In most cases, followers will gather in a common meeting place to worship one or more of these gods. They will typically defer to a set of teachings that has been passed down from early in the religion's history and is considered authoritative to some extent, usually because it's thought to have some supernatural origin such as divine inspiration. Now, a few do give similar authority to the words of living members, such as groups that are heavily into prophecy or otherwise think current leaders are able to speak for the gods, but those are often seen even by most other religions as being culty and dangerous. Interesting that even they notice how toxic this is as a method for establishing knowledge when they see it done in the present instead of the past, but that's a whole other can of worms. Either way, the core body of knowledge that's uniquely theirs will have come through some form of divine revelation and will often rise to the level of unquestionable dogma. Now, I guess that went into a bit more detail than I'd originally planned, but the fact is that religion seems to pretty obviously be a lot of things that atheism is not. Now, you might argue a few of the points I brought up, and that's fine. Maybe not all religions have all these traits, at least to the same extent, but when asking if not having a religion is a religion, if atheism is a religion, it helps to start thinking through what traits we're describing when we use the word. And it sure seems like atheism does not, surprise, surprise, possess most, if any, of them. However, if we wanted to back down from being this particular and just go by the dictionary definition, we end up with the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods, a particular system of faith and worship, or a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance, which I think can be scratched as a hyperbolic, non-literal usage of the word. So this seems pretty open and shut, right? But I can see where religious people come from when they want to change or expand the definition. Of course, different dictionaries will have different definitions, and they don't settle questions like these because they're descriptive rather than prescriptive. On top of that, many theists see this basic religion as a practice revolving around the supernatural blah 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 definition as a superficial simplification, and thus will come up with alternative definitions of the word, usually something along the lines of any fundamental belief about the origin or nature of the universe that shapes a person's outlook on life and informs their understanding of morality and purpose. Now, this might sound like a more complete and inclusive definition. After all, everybody, Christian and atheist alike, tries to understand the nature of the world they live in, and their journeys just happen to lead them to different places. A Christian understands the universe to be a place created by and ordered by God, and this shapes how they live their lives. By contrast, many Christians will say, we believe the universe is a place that appeared through random chance without any guiding force, and that shapes how we live our lives. So to identify religion as a belief in the supernatural or gods ignores the actual substance of how we build worldviews and just points to one specific answer the activity might lead to. I can see how, at a glance, that seems pretty superficial, and how this any belief about the origin or nature of the universe definition can appear to acknowledge a commonality between what Christians and atheists do and set the stage more fairly for discussions between them. Now, I'm not trying to strawman Christians by having them put random chance and so on into their estimation of atheism. I'm sure not all of them will say this, but many will. And not only do these kinds of little jabs run through at least the subtext if not direct language of how many evangelicals see our view of the universe, but the absurdity implied by this phrasing is at the core of the equivalence they try to make between us and them. We have faith in God? Well, how much more faith does it take to believe this all came from nothing? This characterization lets them imply that our view of the world requires the same leap of faith theirs does, that the behaviors and policies we propose are based on the same kind of belief theirs is, and thus that, deep down, we're engaged in the same kind of thought process they are, and have no better justification than they do for how we suggest people should live their lives. In short, we do exactly the same thing they do, but just arrive at different conclusions about the deep mysteries of the universe. So isn't it unfair to label their specific type of conclusions and ensuing practices a religion and, implying religion is an archaic way of viewing the world, treat it differently than the conclusions and ensuing practices of atheists? And isn't it especially unfair to let your conclusions and practices into public schools but not mine? On the surface, this unconventional yet more expansive idea of what a religion truly is can seem to make sense, and I can certainly see the appeal to Christians who feel marginalized by the label of religious. But there are a couple things that fundamentally undercut this attempt at equivalency. First, atheists, or secularists or methodological naturalists or whatever label you want to use, do not arrive at knowledge the same way religion does. And I don't mean that religious people always arrive at knowledge poorly. I'm saying that uniquely religious methodology is unreliable. The people themselves often, in most aspects of their lives, interact with their environment as intelligently as the rest of us, so I'm not trying to be dismissive of them. I'm just saying that if you want to bring religion itself to the table and propose its activities as a way of learning anything, I'm going to have some serious questions for you. So before we let them use this any fundamental belief thing to insinuate atheists and Christians are different sides of the same coin, it's important to pump the brakes and ask the question, how do each of us come up with our beliefs and what do we have backing them up? If we look back at the commonly understood traits of religion, we'll see that it's just riddled with questionable methods of acquiring knowledge. For example, attributing absolute or even high authority to writings passed down by ancients on the grounds that they were inspired by gods is a piss-poor way of coming to understand anything about the nature of the universe or how we should live our lives. Nothing about it is methodologically sound, and in fact it's almost certain to lead to gross, potentially disastrous error. The same can be said for any assertion grounded in what a person claims to know about God, what they claim they divined through prophecy or felt the Lord laid on their heart, or whatever else. This is the fundamental problem of religion. So by abandoning religion, I've sought to be more methodical about seeking out reliable ways of knowing things. Argue if you want that my methods are wrong or limited, but the fact is they are very different from most people understand to be religion. So why try using the same word for both things? There is a very clear distinction to be made here, one that apologists who say, you make truth claims and I make truth claims, are trying to obscure. And it's important that we don't let them do that. So that's a difference in the way we claim to get knowledge. The second is in how much knowledge we claim to have. Religion claims to know, well, basically everything. I won't say religious people think they themselves know everything. Far to the contrary, they proclaim a lot of humility about what they know compared to what God supposedly knows. But since they understand themselves to have access to God, they implicitly claim to have a hotline connecting them to a lot of knowledge. And since this God exists only as part of their own minds and as a narrative generated within their community, his revealed knowledge will more or less be what they want it to be, admittedly in a roundabout, often unintentional way. The long and the short of it is, Christians think they know that, among other things, 1. The universe was spoken into existence by a God and can be best understood and studied as a product of that God's design. 2. The physical universe is just an insignificant, finite part of a cosmology that includes an eternal place of bliss for believers and an eternal place of torment for non-believers. And 3, God has a specific nature and wants specific things from us. These are a lot of things they can't even begin to demonstrate and that we have no reason to believe. Yet they drastically affect how Christians think people should act. And when they use them as the basis for telling others how to act, and for proposing legislation for that purpose, we have very good reason for calling them out on the extent of what they claim to know and how they claim to know it. Atheism makes no such claims, nor does it expect others to act according to them. Now, Christians may try saying that, just as they base their morality on these unverifiable truth claims, we make the truth claim that the universe came from nothing via the Big Bang, and that sets the foundation for our morality. But this isn't true. I act according to the evident reality of how my actions affect myself, others, and society at large with, believe it or not, no concern whatsoever for whether there was a Big Bang. Cosmology and astrophysics are the domain of experts who push forward based on sound scientific findings while acknowledging what they don't know. I can acknowledge that I know close to jack shit about it and thus won't let it impact how I behave toward my fellow humans. However, Christians who also know jack shit about where the universe came from claim it came from a God who wants X, Y, and Z, and this affects how they act and how they expect others to act. The fact that they do and we don't is a pretty important thing that fundamentally distinguishes them from us and helps illuminate what we mean when we say they have a religion and we don't. If I'm going to propose a rule or law about how people should live, it will be based on what I can demonstrate or what is clearly evident about the effects of various actions and inactions. Broad esoteric claims about the nature of the universe don't need to enter the picture and will just pollute the conversation with speculation about things we simply can't know. And by the way, keeping Christian speculation out of the process is not the same as bringing in speculation that Christian claims are false, and any insinuation to this effect grants Christianity way too much default status from the start. But all that having been said, let's zero in on the core issue. Can people use the word religion in a broader sense that includes atheism? Well, I guess they can. We have freedom of speech and technically people can label things how they want. But I would maintain that such a use of the word is pointless, except insofar as it provides a short-sighted sense of gratification for some Christians, and it ultimately just creates confusion that benefits apologists. So to restore the clarity they're trying to deny us, think of what's currently connoted by the use of the word religion. There are all these traits to start with, and if we start talking about building a worldview and deciding how to act, it also involves introducing a lot of poorly evident speculation into the process. These traits are very distinct from atheism. They constitute a unique phenomenon which we generally consider religion. So while we could expand the word religion to cover, well, basically all people when it comes down to it, this specific phenomenon would still exist. We'd just be left without a word for it until we came up with another one. So why not just keep using the word we already have that effectively sums us all up? Why abandon it and then come up with a new word to replace it? So if a Christian tries telling you that atheism is just another religion, I would suggest that you calmly and politely 1. Explain the behaviors and belief-establishing practices you're describing when you use the word religion. 2. Articulate what makes your way of behaving and establishing beliefs substantially different from these practices. And 3. Ask why we wouldn't just keep using the word religion to describe practices that actually are unique. As an atheist, I think the entire practice of claiming to know there's a God and that you and others speak for it is a problem. It will remain a problem whether or not we use the word religion for it, and it will remain distinct from how I and other atheists behave whether or not we use the word religion for it. These are just facts, and there's no need to accommodate apologists who, out of embarrassment at the fundamental nature of what they believe and why, try to obscure the word we use for it. This program was made possible by a grant from John Adams, Bob Generic, Maggie Danger, A Little Logic, S.R. Foxley, The Crowd Pleaser, and Q, and by the generous support of viewers like you. If you'd like to join them in pledging to this channel, please find a link to the Prophet of Zod Patreon below.